Hi, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I'm Sally Swed. I'm the Director of Programs here at iBeam, a platform for artists to engage society's relationship to technology. Oh, I have a little bit of feedback. Let me stand over here and see if that helps. Thank you for coming out and joining us tonight. I know it's a beautiful spring day, so I really appreciate that. This is the second in our series of one-on-one conversations organized with iBeam's close friend and celebrated curator, Barbara London. I think it was about a year ago we dreamt up these conversations with Barbara over a nice glass of wine, and we really kind of dreamed of an opportunity where she could share with the iBeam community a personal glimpse into her ongoing collaborative relationships with artists who have influenced her over the course of her truly remarkable career. Tonight she is joined by pioneering filmmaker and video artist Charles Atlas, and we'll discuss the artist's distinct approaches to video practice and performance spanning for more than 4 decades. Barbara London, as you all know, paved the way for media artists at MoMA, founding the museum's video and media art collection and curating its first ever show on sound art. In January 2020, I'm really excited to share that Barbara will be releasing a book through Phaidon called Video Art, the First 50 Years, so everyone look forward to that. And again, I'm not gonna read full bios, but they're available on our website, so you can read the many accomplishments of our 2 speakers tonight. But Charles Atlas is widely known for his prolific work spanning across mediums and collaborative practice, and was central to the development of media dance, a genre in which original performance work is created for the camera. Now, before I welcome our speakers tonight, I just have a couple housekeeping notes. First and foremost, I think you've all managed to find the wine bar. Please make yourselves comfortable there. It also is a nice, quiet space if you just need some time to zone out or take some time to yourself. And you can also please feel free to help yourself to a glass of wine at the end of the program and chat a bit. Just behind me, there's a door, and if you go to the right, you'll find the wine bar. If you go to the left, you'll find the bathroom. And please stick around for the end of the conversation. We'll also have like a more formal Q&A with the microphone and all that. If there's anything we can do to make you comfortable, please feel free to wave me over. Any of my wonderful colleagues at iBeam that you'll find around the space waving right now. And lastly, I just wanted to share, as many of you heard, it's a really big year for us here at iBeam. We're celebrating our 20th birthday, and we have a very special event planned for June 18th at the Wythe Hotel. Stay tuned for more information on that soon. It's always best to join our mailing list to hear these announcements first. I will also be announcing our open call for residents in just the next 2 weeks for 2020, which feels wild to say. So stay tuned for that. Without further ado, let me welcome Barbara and Charles. Thank you.
So thank you everybody for coming, a whole lot of friends. And I want to point out Bridget is the wonderful editor at Phaidon, and I'm happy to work with. When I was in high school, my father said, whenever you do a public speech, have a prop. So my prop is Charlie's book. You can get it on Phaidon, on Amazon. And it's really great because he doesn't like to write or get his own words down, but he will speak tonight. But he has many of his friends who have written about him and his work, including me. Okay. So you can come and look at it after if you want. So Charlie, we've known each other a while.
A while.
We won't count the years, but we could say it. So you came to New York in '69.
'69.
Which is when I was in graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
I started to work at MoMA in the early '70s. And I think we both hit video around the same time. We were discovering 73.
73, yeah.
Yeah, so, but you had worked with film before that.
I did Super 8 film starting in 1970 when I got a Super 8 camera. And I did a 16 millimeter film in '72. on my own, just one of Merce's dances, Merce Cunningham's dances.
And you were gainfully employed by being invited to be, what, the stage manager?
Assistant stage manager to start out with for the Cunningham Company. And so I was on tour with them. And it was in those days, we were guaranteed 20 weeks of work so we could get unemployment. That's what the dancers, everyone. So that's how it was.
Right. How you kept the wolves away from the door. So what drew you to get that Super 8 camera?
Well, I wanted, I wanted to make films, and not necessarily Super 8 films. I wanted to make Hollywood films. I mean, those are the kind, but not really Hollywood films. I wanted to make the European version of Hollywood films. But at the time, I dropped out of college and came to New York. I went to Swarthmore College for a couple of years and then dropped out. And there was really, at that time, there was no place to study. There was no film courses or anything like that. So I learned everything on my own, really. I worked for a film company first as a messenger, and learned something there, and then taught myself everything else.
So you had already been in the Merce Cunningham studio when you got the equipment in '73.
I started working with Merce Cunningham when he had a studio on 3rd Avenue in the 30s. And in 1973, we moved to Westbeth, and the studio that he built on the top floor. And it was soon after that Merce asked me to I used to take my Super 8 camera along on tour and film everything. I mean, the picnics and, behind the scenes, not the dances so much, and things in my hotel room. And so I showed them to the company after a Brooklyn Academy season, and it was after that Merce asked me to collaborate with him. He wanted to. I had already made a film of Walk Around Time, one of his dances, and he asked me to collaborate with him on video, which I didn't know. And the story is that he decided to do video. John Cage encouraged him because John wanted him to stay at home, and he thought if he made videos, he could just send the videos out and Merce could stay at home. So that was the idea. But so we had a grant from the NEA, and I bought equipment, a 3-camera industrial setup, black and white, with the switcher and monitor setup, and we spent a summer. I learned video from a book, from Spaghetti City Video Manual, and then I taught it to Merce, and we spent a summer just experimenting with the camera and body. We got a student dancer in to work with us, and we just saw what the possibilities were, and then we made our first piece.
So in this milieu, it's pretty well known Merce had in his, his orbit, musicians, painters. So were you yourself in an orbit like that of other people? Like you were
No,
living
I was
downtown?
very young. I didn't feel like I deserved to be a collaborator, really, but he treated me like one. So I grew into it.
You grew into it, okay. Because you, as we'll see this evening, you've had an affinity for music and for keeping your ear to the ground of what people were doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the years of touring and all the musicians that have come through the Cunningham Company when I look back, it was everyone.
Yep, lots of people. So let's start these. Okay. So I put together just a couple of slides. I thought it would be interesting. That is the Westbeth building that Merce moved into in '73, seen from across the river.
And the top floor is where a studio was.
Yeah. And I just thought I would show you an early image of, relatively early of MoMA.
That's MoMA, yeah.
Yeah. And then Merce wandering around teaching a class. And I thought this was curious, Merce holding a camera.
That was for camera 3 shoot, and this is there's a dance called TV Rerun, which I was the decor, and I roamed around the edge of the dance with my Super 8 camera and taking film the whole time, and the dancers they would make it was a long phrase, and they could come in and leave at any time. But they had to come in from where I was and leave where I was, and I would wander around. And usually there were a couple of other people taking photographs, still photographs, that came with me. And so for a studio event, Merce did my part.
So this was for what TV station? Do you remember? Or
I don't. This was. He did a version of this for Camera 3, which was like a CBS
yeah.
program.
Yeah. So then this is you, early, and Merce, relatively early. And then we're going to see a little bit of this piece, Blue Studio. But I thought it might be interesting, because this is 1975, 76, to think about, this is your and Merce's first use of chroma key. And this wizard down there is
That was
Namjoon
our only use of chroma, well, until the very end, but.
Yeah. But it came about because of Namjoon having a connection to WNET's TV lab. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So then Peg, being a very incredible spirit and very generous soul, always remembering who had helped him, he always then wanted to help them. So it was a way for you and Merce to make a new work, or?
Yeah, the deal was that we would make a 15-minute piece, and then he would take that and without sound, and then he would add sound, and then do another 15 minutes using some of the material that we made and remixing it.
Right. So did it give you an opportunity to work with different equipment, or?
Yeah, we never had. I mean, this is all studio, professional studio equipment. We had, as I say, an industrial setup, and we worked out everything. We taped out the exact space in the Cunningham studio and figured out all the shots ahead of time.
Right.
It turned out not to be exactly accurate, but anyway, that's how we worked.
Yeah.
And then we went into the studio and shot it. I mean, this one, the way we worked, we went to the WNET TV lab, and we saw what, they showed us what other people had done, what they could do, and they had this chroma key set up, blue at the time, and we asked, well, how many generations can you do without, that's acceptable, and it was 5. So that's where the idea came from, that we would end up with 5 Merces all in different setups.
Right. So probably you saw Ed Emschwiller.
Saw Ed Emschwiller, that's the line thing.
Yeah. So that was sort of...
I don't know the name of his piece, but...
Escape Mates, I bet it was, yeah. So maybe we should take a look. Charlie and I sat down a couple of weeks ago and we figured out what we would show. So you're going to see the first now. It's about 3-4 minutes.
3 minutes, maybe, yeah. This is the first section of Blue Studio. each section begins with Merce against some background. I shot all the backgrounds after we actually shot the piece. The studio was very small and had a concrete floor, but Merce just danced in anyway. And if he put his hands up, he could touch the lights.
Put his hands up to what?
He would touch the lights.
Oh, okay.
So there wasn't a lot of space.
Whose idea was the snow?
Me.
You.
I mean, Merce didn't like to look at himself, so I did all the work at post-production. I don't know if he ever watched it, really. That's just the beginning of that section.
So some of you are real video mavens, I know. So this would be what we call single channel, right?
Mm.
And it was aired on the WNET VTR review at Sunday night?
Sunday night, the Art Ghetto, yeah.
Yeah. So was that exciting? Or you've already had your work on TV through Merce? Or
No,
No.
I think this is probably the first one.
Okay.
It's funny having your work on TV because you don't, all these people see it and you have no idea about any response. So it's a strange system.
Yeah.
I mean, I had that for a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
That there's huge audiences, but you don't even feel it.
But the work, the afterlife is that it's part of Electronic Arts Intermix distributions. So I would imagine that schools and
I mean, it's in a lot of collections.
yeah, so including MoMA. Yeah. So then let me just see what I put up next. Oh, so you did a lot of would you call it collaboration? Like you worked with Douglas Dunn and Carol Armitage. Would you consider that collaboration?
Yes, there were collaborations. I mean, different kind of collaborations from the collaboration with Merce, where I took a lot more responsibility because I worked with Merce until 1983, and then I started doing work for television with various other collaborators. Douglas Dunn, Carol Armitage. And I thought, I'm going to have to go through the whole thing like I did with Merce and teach them everything, but it just wasn't the time. When you're really working on television productions or any kind of film production, you don't get the kind of time that you do when you're sponsored by a dance company. Because with Merce, the dancers and the dance was the most important thing. Or there were allowances made so they could do the best. That was the point. And with these the television production needs start to come to the fore.
And with Merce, I know that some of the video that you and he did together, it ended up actually in the dance. So there were monitors.
All of the pieces that we did for video first became stage dances that he expanded
Right.
afterwards.
Yeah. So it's a very rich history. Yeah.
I mean, he was very economic with his choreographic material.
Multi-purpose, or so let's see. Oh, so when we think of multi-purpose, what you've just seen was single channel. So Charlie has a lot of great ideas and works in installation as well. And after Merce passed in 2009, you had all of this beautiful footage of Merce.
Well, I made, when I very first got my Super 8 camera, I made the Super 8 films of close-ups of Merce's joints. We just did it after rehearsal, sort of a sketch for something that we were going to do in 16 millimeter later. And I always remember, then I did a 16 millimeter version that was used as a decor for an event, I think. And it was much more formal and controlled, but I always preferred the more informal ones. And so when I decided to make this piece, it's a 4-channel piece with 10 monitors, and it's sort of choreographed. Like, I thought of the monitors like dancers, really. And so it's choreographed in a way like one of Merce's dances might be choreographed. So there's some unison, there's some separate parts, but, and then I used, for sound, I used this sound that John Cage had recorded of places he and Merce had been together. And I mixed it all together, and then I put some lights in it so it was a very dark piece, and the shadows, the lights changed and the shadows moved across. And so this piece is in the collection of the Tate Modern now.
So we'll look at an excerpt.
Well, before what you'll see in the excerpt is the 4 channels are across the bottom. That's not part of the installation. That's just so you can see what they were, because they're very small on the monitors. You don't see the shadows changing in this one because it's a still photo of them. You don't see the shadows in this one changing because it's the still that I put in. The basis is a still photograph, and I inserted all the videos.
So I just thought, look, Charlie is so versatile and has such a great eye that he, on 2 different occasions, for the MoMA Rauschenberg show and for the Judson Dance Theater, The Work Is Never Done, he was invited to take material and to really create a very interesting installation. So I just thought perhaps you might want to say a word.
Yeah. No, that was my first experience doing a big exhibition. It was very interesting to see how it's done.
Right.
And how much time and resources MoMA has to do it. They really have more than anyone else.
More than what?
More than any of the other museums.
Except, well, the Tate's probably up there.
Mm-mm.
No? Oh. Truth comes out, okay. Insider story, all right. So, so we've seen a single channel, an installation. You've talked about work you've done for television.
Well, I started in '83. I started working for television. The first piece I did was for WGBH in Boston, and then I worked for French television and English television and Danish television and a lot of different televisions. And because I was working in dance, it was not language-based, so I could work in Europe. So I did a lot of work in Europe, which was more receptive to art on television. And this piece, Put Blood in the Music, was done for London Weekend Television, which was ITV, a commercial channel. And it was produced by, it was on the South Bank show. And it was produced by an Irish production company. And I've done, I think I've done 4 documentaries. One, this one, I did one on the life of Merce. I did one on the life of Leigh Bowery, the life and work of Leigh Bowery and Merce. And I did one about a show I did with Anthony and the Johnsons called Turning. But the other piece that is well known is Hail the New Puritan, which some people think is a documentary, but is definitely not a documentary.
I think I have an image of that, but we'll maybe play.
So Put Blood in the Music was about the New York downtown music scene in 1989. And I focused on John Zorn and Sonic Youth as the 2 representatives of 2 different strands of the downtown music scene. And then I also did short pieces on Hugo Largo, which was a band, another band, and then Arto Lindsay's Ambitious Lovers. So they had small parts, but it was like a feature length. I mean, it was longer than an hour, so.
And did you have artistic freedom to pick the
Totally.
bands?
I mean, I worked with a producer who was really more in touch with all the musicians and did the, worked with me and did the interviews. Yeah. But we shot it, this is definitely a green screen shoot. And so that I didn't, well, you'll see, I did a lot of manipulation of the image.
Okay. So we'll take a look at the John Zorn.
This is the John Zorn introduction to the John Zorn section that's going to be shown.
Right. Okay, so we'll do that.
John Zorn, an American improviser who's really into sounds. John Zorn,
a leading person in a scene of real co-equals.
Raise the
It's really
sound.
like this, a recombinant kind of view of how music should be made. Every one of these guys who appears in these bands has their own groups, and their own groups contain the same guys that appear in Zorn's group.
Originally, when I saw John perform for the first time, it was obvious that this was the guy who was going to be very important.
changed my way of doing music and seeing music.
Zorn has been able to sort of scurry in, fiddle around, toy with things, move out, stick other things onto it.
Yeah, John's a musician to me, and his music is really music that can only really come from New York.
He's taken elements from Eastern cultures as well as the great American tradition of jazz and blended with more experimental avant-garde modes as well, which has brought to fruition a very, very diversified kind of sound.
There's as much variety in his little pinky than in most of the musicians that I know.
When I first saw John Zorn live,
He was a master musician, woodwind, a saxophone player, and also incorporated a kind of insanity into the music.
I just couldn't believe what I saw.
He's got a gift for creating literally an orchestra out of so much different material and so many different musicians. It's sort of like kind of a Leonard Bernstein, downtown type.
As John Zorn, for instance, who wakes up with music and falls asleep with music.
I'm born and raised in New York. I lived in New York all my life, and for me, Spillane is New York. In many ways, he epitomizes the tough detective. In doing an arrangement about Spillane, I researched the subject in detail. I reread a lot of the books. I saw a lot of the films that were made of the books. So in picking him as a subject, I was really picking New York as a subject.
Nice.
This just reminds me that when we were shooting the Talking Heads, I told the DP, it's too boring to just keep, just do something different. And so the heads are always moving around and going in close up. And I thought, well, then this is going to be hard for the editor, but the editor was me, so.
You succeeded.
I like that. And then also that way of using people's words to make the script, I don't think that had been done so much. I mean, I was told anyway that, some people criticized me for not letting the people say everything they had to say, but anyway, that's the way I did it.
It's your work.
And also I want, all of the backgrounds are New York backgrounds. I wanted to just have all the multiplicity of things going on in New York as the background to all this, so you would get an idea what New York music was like.
Do you go to a lot of music?
Not at that time. I did, but not. I barely leave the house anymore.
That's what happens with age. Okay. Oh, so yeah, I thought collaboration. So we're not going to show a clip from this, but because we must. So this is.
I've been working with Michael Clark since 1985, I guess, or 4. I started out. Well, I've always been a filmmaker, but I started out doing his lighting and sometimes costumes for his shows, and I've worked with him ever since. But we've made in the early in 1986, we made a feature-length film when Michael was like 21, called Hail the New Puritan, and then I made another film with him in 1989 called Because We Must, which is based on a stage play, a stage piece, a stage ballet.
And again, these videos were through British television, or?
They were both for Channel 4, commissioned by Channel 4. And I've continued to work with Michael, and now I do lighting and video that's in the production, actually.
So before we started the program, Charlie was telling me that Michael Clark will have a big show at the Barbican next year.
But he's also, there's going to be a new piece, a live show, and then also a big exhibition at the Barbican Gallery, which is a gallery. It's part of the Barbican group of spaces, and it's quite big.
So a show like that, like the Judson, then it's a lot of ephemera or
No,
videos.
we're trying to figure out exactly what it is. Actually, some of the other artists, I'm doing a big piece for it, and some of the other artists that Michael's worked with are also doing pieces either based on what they did or something new. I don't know. We don't know what everyone's doing yet, and whether there was supposed to be live performance in it, but I think we've gotten rid of, that's so complicated with Michael's work. I mean, because it's very technically demanding, and we would have to lay a floor in the gallery, and that's a lot.
So technically demanding for the installation and
no,
create.
for the dancing.
For the dancers.
I mean, you know, you can't do it with student dancers.
Can't do it with what?
With student dancers,
No,
which is what they do at a lot of museum exhibitions when they use dance.
Okay. Oh, that brings us up. Let me just see if I had. Okay. So this is then jumping forward a few decades.
Way forward, yeah.
Because I just thought it would be interesting to talk about this work. There's, of course, a lot of other pieces that you've done, but to think of how you changed in the way you've worked with installation.
Well, I mean, I had two big changes. In 2003, I started working with live video in various ways. Real-time video in installations and in performances and just as video improvisation. And then in 2006 or 2008, I guess, I got my first real commercial gallery in London. And so I had an opportunity to work in bigger spaces than I had before. So I started doing installation, and I wanted to do work that didn't look like my other work, so I tried to make it look very different to start out with. Knowing that it would end up looking like my work in some way. But I made some rules, and I did a 2-room installation that was, one room was black and white and silent and all abstract, just straight lines and numbers, and the other room was sort of a dizzy making fun house, sort of horror fun house. Sort of a dialectic idea that also didn't look like what I had done before. So, and then I sort of followed that up with other, that's what I've been doing mostly, these big installation pieces that are immersive and experiential. And I think what we're going to show, this is a piece called The Waning of Justice, which was done as a 2-room, 8-channel, 2-room installation that was done at the Loring Augustine Gallery in Chelsea. And then the excerpt that, for the Venice Biennale, in whatever year that was, a couple years ago, they wanted to do this piece, but they didn't have enough room, so I condensed it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 channels and did it all in a different kind of setup on a single wall, and that was called The Tyranny of Consciousness, that piece. And basically, there's one room, I mean, in The Waning of Justice, there was one room that had 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 channels all around on all the walls, and based on sunsets that I had shot as part of when I was at the Rauschenberg residency in Captiva, and I was housed right on the Gulf of Mexico. And so I'm not really a nature person, but the sunset was the easiest thing to shoot without schlepping equipment. So I shot about 44 sunsets over 2 years. And then I decided, well, I'll probably cover them over, but maybe they'll be the basis of something, because sunsets are so corny. But then I made this other kind of piece out of it. And I added this, the Lady Bunny as a contrasting element. And she was in another room, 35 minutes. I mean, this whole piece is 35 minutes long. And she's constantly talking, and it's all about politics. And then at the end, after this last sunset, she sings a song. So what the clip is, a bit of the end of one of the 2 channels of the gridded sunsets. There was one part of the installation was these words that change and turn over a little bit like, I forget, like that television show where you get one letter at a time. I forget, what's that called? No, the one, anyway, you know what I mean. Wheel of Fortune, yeah. So, and then at the end she sings a disco song, but so in the clip that you're going to see, it's just a couple of minutes of the end of the sunsets, and then just part of the song. So this is an installation shot from Venice. And there's a countdown there where it's on 2 colors on the floor mixing to white. It counts down from 18 minutes down to 0. And the grid keeps changing different parts of different sunsets.
Well, I mean, you can't run without millions of dollars, that's for sure. And
I'll tell you about it.
If you've gotten those campaign contributions, those are from the war profiteers, the people who make missiles, the people who make tanks. Talking about working on the infrastructure, which they all talk about, both parties. Oh, the crumbling infrastructure, we've got to fix it. Well, you know, pay somebody to fix it instead of pay somebody to go to war. It has really become insane, and no one is talking about peace. I don't want to live in a world without peace. messed up my own good thing. I messed up my own good thing. I messed up my own good thing. I messed up my own good thing. What the fuck is wrong with me? I don't like who it is that I see. I looked in the mirror and it all got clearer. Slowly I'm being forced to see. Ow! You were the one, I knew it, but I blew it, yeah. You were the one for me. Yeah. I knew it, but I blew it. Oh, you were the one. You can put the blame on me. It's a shame, a dirty shame, dirty shame. It's a shame, it's a shame. It's a shame on me, a dirty shame. It's a shame, 'cause you were the one.
Lady Bunny.
So the way that worked in the original installation was she was in the back room giving this long political diatribe, and then so you could hear her words in the front room. So when I condensed it, I edited her words and put them in the main thing, and then we had the song. So basically, the world ends, and then there's a disco song. That was my concept.
And the sunsets look almost atom bomb-ish. I mean, there's a very end of the world feel. Yeah. So I'll just end with last night I went to the kitchen and I saw Charlie perform in the piece that Ahmadi did. But anyway, I won't leave that up for very long. But I thought it was interesting just to see, because you started to work with him, 15, 20 years ago? Yeah. And I saw you do real-time editing.
I did a piece which we did beginning I think we did it for the Whitney Biennial in 2004 for the first time, a live piece with live video, and I did portraits of different women on a revolving stage live, one for each song, and then I made a film of it afterward. And we did a whole tour in Europe, and then I made a film afterwards, sort of a documentary concert film. And then I've been, she's been a friend of mine. She's now called Anoni. And I just finished my stage debut as a performer at the kitchen.
There you are. You did a soft shoe. Okay. So maybe before we open it up for questions, I just want to say I want to thank I-Beam, Roddy, Sally, Sarah, can't read my writing, and Jay and Adrian, who's done the tech. Thank you very much. So I don't know, do you want to ask some questions and maybe we can open it up? Okay. Here's the microphone.
Hi, I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit about your process or your transition from your work until you started to do more installations.
Say that again?
How do you transition between the video and installation? If it's a single channel or?
Well, since the beginning, I've always done multi-channel work, even when I was doing single channel. I mean, in 1980, I guess, I did a piece called More Men, which is an hour-and-a-half, two-channel piece that was shown various places. And I kind of had to perform it live because there was no way to sync two channels at that time. So I had 2 different 3/4-inch machines, and I knew which one ran faster. So I had to stop it, pause it, and unpause it very quickly to keep it in sync. But so I was really inspired by Chelsea Girls, basically, Andy Warhol's Chelsea Girls. So I've always been thinking about multi-channel. I did a two-screen film in 1970 something called Tours, a 2-screen film of one of Merce Cunningham's dances. So when I first had the opportunity to actually do installation in galleries, I just wanted to do something different. I mean, I already had ideas of what to do, but I really wanted it to think that I was someone else, a new person. So I tried to, be particular about not having bodies in it, and so started in a new place. But then all the lines are blurred now. I do a little bit of everything. I just add one more thing to it.
Yeah, do I have this might come out fragmented, but I was just wondering about like your playfulness in terms of like how it comes off in the formation of your process, and like if that makes sense, or like the intentionality of things, and or lack of, rather, because like I know when I make stuff, I have no idea what I'm making.
I work with collaborators, and so different collaborators bring out different parts of my personality. So,
like something like the sunsets, like how did that like derive?
Well, that was a special piece. I mean, that came. Well, first of all, I had all this material, all this sunset material. I didn't know what to do with, and but I knew kind of what I was going to do, and so I organized all the sunsets, sunk up 44 sunsets, so all the suns set at the same time, and it was complicated, more complicated than that. But and then I just thought, what can I do that? I think in installation, my experience is that people, stay about 2 minutes. So my challenge always is to make something that's going to keep people for longer than that, as long as I can. And so this piece was like 35 minutes. And so partly I use the turning letters from like Wheel of Fortune, because so then people are sort of trying to guess what the word is. And that was one strategy. And so that was one 18-minute sunset over 2 screens. And then the other one, I thought, well, people don't want to wait 18 minutes for the sun to set, so I'll do one 18-minute one that's 3 sunsets every 6 minutes, so they get a sunset every 6 minutes. And then I wanted to have a contrasting element, really contrasting, so I had the Lady Bunny, who I've known for 20 years, and I've always wanted to work with her, so I told her she was on my bucket list and she had to do it. And so I just, made this piece, that, also was very political and sort of expressed everything I wanted to express about how I was feeling about the state of the world. A little apocalyptic. So that's how that one came about.
And did you write the text of the one you just...
No, but Bunny and I had several lunches together, and we talked about, I know that when I first met her in the 80s, she was very non-political, very apolitical, only about disco and entertainment. But since then, she's become very political and very knowledgeable and has a lot of opinions, very, very, very progressive, very radical. And so we talked about a lot of things that were on my mind and on her mind. And then when we filmed it, we had, she brought a lot of looks. We were going to do a lot of different things. But it was on the day, we were filming it on the day when this huge snowstorm was in New York. And they were going to close, shooting it near here at Luring Augustine in Bushwick. And they were going to close the subways at 4 o'clock, so we wouldn't have been able to get out. So we really had, at the end, I said, like, we have a half hour left, Bunny, we're going to just go. So I was like, go. And she just, well, I know she can talk, so she just did. I mean, some of it is, not always coherent, but I edited it in a certain way, so.
Hello. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. And thank you for taking a risk on a medium that was just not existing, right? I wanted to ask you, and also thank you, because this was just so enjoyable, but also with so much substance. And yes, I wanted to ask you, same question for two things. How do you keep your creative longevity? And also, how do you have longevity as a practicing artist?
I don't think about it. I just keep going. I try to learn something new that I don't know. I'm not interested in repeating myself, so, unless I'm paid a lot of money, but that doesn't happen very often. So I try to learn something new that I don't, for every project. These days it's like learning new software that I didn't know before, and so that pushes me to make something new. And when I'm doing live video, that's really like performing without a net. I have an idea. It's not exactly a script, but I have an idea about what I want to do, but it doesn't ever turn out quite that way. But so I've done, the last big project I did was, which was shown at Brooklyn Academy last year, was called Tesseract, and it was a 2-act thing that I collaborated with 2 choreographers. The first act was a stereoscopic 3D film, dance film, where you wore glasses and it was in 3D. And then we changed the stage and did a live performance with 3 live cameras and live projection, live mixing, projected on a scrim in front of the dance. So, and that one I really did have I've developed over the period that we were working on it, a kind of a score that I try to, I do certain kinds of things at certain points, but it's all live. So that's challenging.
I'm curious about what era of video editing you enjoyed the most. Is it contemporary? Like I've done some documentary editing, but I started in Final Cut Pro, so I never had the experience of physically editing film, like the tactile experience.
Well, I started editing 16mm film, so, and I'm glad I started with film because it makes you aware of the frames. Because I thought early video, I just thought the editing was terrible. People just sort of edited here and there and fade and blah, blah, blah. I never made a fade for the first 10 years of my work until I could control it. So I was very conscious, and working with dance and rhythm and, being trained by Merce, so I got to be quite a good editor. But that's changed. I don't do that kind of editing anymore. I used to do these single channel pieces for television and edit them, and the editing was quite a big part of it. As I say, I would be, when I was working with Merce, we figured out everything ahead of time, and the shooting was really about getting it right. So sometimes we did many, many takes of the same shot to get it right. So the shooting wasn't exactly fun, but it functioned. We were we had a goal. After that, I never had a chance to make those kind of plans. So my goal really was to have energy and fun in the shooting and then give it to the editor, who was me, and try to make something out of it. So I had fun on both ends, making something out of it and shooting it. So that's my, and I've done editing a video. I started, the very first editing I did was 2-inch video, broadcast video, and the only way you could edit was like go, you had to like snap your fingers in that, and they would push a button, and sort of on the fly. And then when I was working on with Merce, the first version we had was open reel, black and white, 1/2 inch, and you would wind the things back 2.5 times, and press go and hope you got it right on the edit. I mean, you'd have to do, you know. So, and then for years I'm very frame accurate oriented, but the offline systems in the early days were not frame accurate. So I would often have to, you know, try time and again, and then if I got it wrong, then the edit before had to be redone.
When did frame accuracy come in? CMX? No.
No, BVU. I mean, the first time I had a frame accurate offline system was in France, when I worked at INA, and they had, I was just in heaven because you could really edit it. So I remember that at INA, the French place that I worked at, the Institut National de l'Audiovisuel, in New York, I had worked at the standby program where you could get editing for a cheaper rate as an artist, but you had to work at certain hours. Anyway, in France, at that time, everyone stopped work at 6 o'clock, and there was this whole facility there empty all night. So I was like, I worked at night I was like, you're kidding. So I worked every night from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. In suburban Paris, but I had that first piece that I was really able to edit that way was Parafango, the piece I made with Carol Armitage, and it has very complicated editing in it. But I was able. That was because I was able to have a frame accurate. I mean, you all have it so easy now.
Should we do one more question? Or no question? Do it informally over a glass of wine. That's it. Thank you, iBeam. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Charlie.